Welcome back to Six Rotations, as we've got a fantastic episode for you. The AVCA Preseason Top 25 poll is out, and I am here with Mick Haley, legendary NCAA volleyball coach, to break it all down for you, including talking about a couple key seniors that are using that extra year of COVID eligibility and the biggest transfers. Second half of our episode, we'll talk about Mick's 10 most notable transfers heading into the August 27th opening day. As we take a look, Mick, we don't want to waste any time. Let's jump right in, taking a look at the AVCA coaches poll. Let's take a look at the top 5 teams for this 2021 fall season. And Mick, as we kind of predicted a little bit in our first episode, Kentucky, although they are defending champs, not number one. The Texas Longhorns returning a ton of talent. Logan Eggleston leads the way. Texas, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Washington, and Nebraska, the top 5 teams in the 2021 preseason top 25. What do you think?
I think 4 of those are real accurate. I think Kentucky's going to have trouble living up to that for a while. They lost too much too early. The coaches gave them 17 first place votes. I don't know if people are paying attention. If Craig had to do that to keep his job, finish first with those 17 first, he'd have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah, we talked in our first episode about the preseason schedule for Kentucky. They're going to have a ton of tough matchups. The ESPN schedule has come out, the Big Ten Network schedule, a lot of games on national TV. And if you haven't gone ahead, go ahead and check out our first episode after this, where Mick and I break down the best pre-conference tournaments and standalone matches. And go ahead and click that subscribe button as well, as we are just trying to grow the sport, continually telling our fans more and more about this volleyball season. As Washington sits at 4, that may be the one that your casual fan, right? You see Texas, you see Wisconsin, you see Kentucky, and you see Nebraska. Those are all, the usual suspects. But Washington, a team that got into the Final Four. Keegan Cook's got a lot cooking out there in the Pacific Northwest, huh?
Yeah, he's got it going, and he's got his lineup out there. He's big, he's strong, he's experienced now. You can make a case for him, but you can also make a case for Nebraska, Florida, Minnesota. I think those teams could all fit in there. It's one player here or one player there right now, the way it looks.
And Washington bringing back Lauren Sanders, Samantha Dreschel, and Emma Cali. Let's go ahead and reveal the 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And here we see that layer of teams that you may have just teased, and a couple other Sweet 16, Elite 8 representatives from April with Florida, Minnesota. Those 2 are going to duel off in pre-conference play. Purdue and Pittsburgh, 8 and 9. Pitt reloading and bringing back Chi and Lund. And then Baylor, who gets Yassiana Presley back, along with Sedgwick, and a key transfer that we'll talk about here in our second half of the show.
Yeah, both Pittsburgh and Baylor got key transfers, and both of them have to figure out if they're going to shuffle their lineups, whether they're going to stay with the 5-1 or whether they're going to go a little bit more 6-2. There's some real things to watch there. I would look at that closely, and Purdue seems to be standing pat. They had a very good team last year. Could have maybe been a top 5 team. Dave looks like he's going to stand pat and play his cards.
Yeah, 9 and 10 reloaded. Purdue has not lost anyone from their Elite 8 run, their first time going to the regional finals since 2013. And they get All-American Caitlin Newton back on the left side. Libero Jenna Otek announced she's using that extra COVID year as well. But on the left side of this top 5, Florida said goodbye to a couple, Paige Hammonds as well. In Minnesota, Reagan Pittman not using that extra year, and a transfer, and Adana Rollins going away. And stay tuned to find out where she's headed as we take a look at the next 5. And we're going to be doing this every week. Every week, we're going to start our show talking about the top 25. Overall, Mick, this top 15 with OSU, PSU, Louisville, Oregon, and BYU, it feels like there aren't too many discrepancies here in the top 15, right?
No, I think the coaches are pretty good at this point. However, I think if you pay attention behind the scenes to what BYU has been doing, I want you put an asterisk beside BYU to watch them and see if they don't move up. They are real unknown right now because they picked up some real key players. So that would be one that I might move a little bit higher, but those five are pretty solid.
I'll tell you right now, Mick's number one transfer that we'll get to in a couple of minutes is headed to BYU. Plus, they're bringing back Taylor Ballard-Nixon, Kennedy Eschenberg, and brought in a couple other starting transfers from other teams, all conference libero, a couple other names as well for BYU. Ohio State didn't need to bring back anyone. They only had youngsters leading their way to the NCAA tournament. So it'll be interesting to see what Coach Jen Flynn Oldenburg has in her sophomore campaign. Penn State has been the transfer portal Loki of sorts here in this offseason as Russ Rose has been busy. We'll talk a little bit about that. Louisville had a couple big names come back as well. They'll start out in Tempe for their first weekend with Tori Dilfer back, along with Anna Stevenson for her to set to. And Oregon brings back Taylor Borup. And of course, their NCAA tournament run came to an end at the hands of Purdue in the regional semifinals. So that's your third row. Let's take a look at the fourth row. And the first thing that jumped out to me, Mick, when I saw this top 25 was the love that coaches finally give to the non-Power 5, the non-BYU, the Western Kentucky, the Conference USA juggernaut that went undefeated up until that Kentucky matchup in the Elite Eight. That was in the Sweet 16. That was a fantastic run for Travis Hudson and company.
Well, there are some things about these teams that are really interesting. I do agree with you on Western Kentucky. They have proved themselves year in, year out to be really a tough team come around tournament time. They deserve the ranking. I think Washington State's the team that could be much higher. They ended up the season with the Washington and Utah as their final 2 weekends. That's 4 matches they did not get to play because of COVID. Utah losing a key point scorer to a transfer, 3.5 points to 4 points per set. That could hurt them significantly. So you could see a lot of movement in those 4 or 5 teams there.
I would say the Pac-12 fans have a right to be a little upset at this top 20. You've got Washington at 4, which is great. I think, better than many people expected. Then you've got Oregon at 14. So nobody between 4 and 14 in that juggernaut conference. Washington State, UCLA, and Utah here bunched up at 17, 18, 19. Let's go over a couple of the COVID eligibility returners on each of these teams as Mac May comes back. UCLA also added all-conference second-teamer from the Big 12 and Shelby Martin from Kansas State. Washington State brings back Panina Tusa as Utah loaded again with Danny Drews, but they did say goodbye to one of their players, but bring in another as we continue to tease our next segment here with the transfers. We'll talk about Utah in a little bit. Western Kentucky brings back 4 starters in Judene, who had that terrible injury against Kentucky, really cost them. Jackson, Kale, and Shelton as well. So Hudson down in Bowling Green will be locked and loaded as we wrap this up with our final 5 teams. These 5 teams snagged a last row in our preseason poll. Stanford had a forgettable season, first time missing the tournament in a long time. But even though Megan McClure not coming back, they've got a young group that Kevin Hambly's really excited about. And clearly the coaches saw the name Stanford. They're respecting Stanford. 21 there, Pepperdine, Rice. So 2 Conference USA teams jumping into the top 25 here with a pair of ACC teams rounding it out. So 3 ACC teams as well as 2 Conference USA. And you see the 3 Western Conference teams, right? BYU, San Diego, and Pepperdine out of the WCC. What do you think about this final line here? What jumps out to you, Mick?
Well, I would have liked to have seen the coaches maybe let Stanford earn their way into the poll since they had such a poor season last year with all of the things that they had to go through. They have, in my opinion, the toughest schedule in the whole country to start with. So I think they very well could have played themselves into a position, but a lot of people look like they gave them credit in the poll. And I like having Pepperdine, Rice, San Diego, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame. However, there may be some teams that will overtake them, but right now they had good springs and kind of proved themselves with their consistency. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's a good top 25.
I agree. I'm titillated. I cannot wait. I think Stanford, it almost doesn't matter when you have that tough of a schedule. We've talked about it last week where they have the number one strength of schedule in the entire nation. So if they were ranked, if they were unranked, we'll find out very early on. A trip down to Austin, playing the Gators, going up to Oregon, hosting Nebraska. The list goes on and on of the quality of opponents that Hambly's going to have to deal with. It'll be up to Kip and Baird. They've got a new setter. We're not quite sure who that's going to be. So I'm looking forward to seeing what movement goes on there as we get to our next segment, Mick. And this is going to be Mick's transfers. I'm going to let you take center stage as we take a look at the biggest name transfer, and that is going to be Kenzie Korber, All-American opposite from Utah, headed to BYU. You love the Cougars. We're buying high on BYU and Heather Olmstead's crew out west. What do you like about Korber?
Well, Korber is an immediate scorer. She's left-handed, will help on the right side. She's proven 3.5 points per set. Big player for Utah before she transferred to BYU. So that hurts Utah. That really strengthens BYU, and good leadership. She's got a lot of fire. People like watching her, and seems like her teammates like playing with her.
All right, from one opposite to an outside, and this is someone that, as a former Gator, every time I watch Missouri versus Florida in the last couple of years, all I've heard the voice of the Gators, Tom Collette, say is DeBerg for the kill, DeBerg again, DeBerg again. What a dig by DeBerg, and Kylie DeBerg is on the move to a team that you are picking as a dark horse in the SEC, and that's down south to the Bayou, as DeBerg adds to an LSU team that, to be honest, Mick, has not been notable here in the last few seasons.
Well, LSU came on this last year. They had a transfer in the spring from Northwestern State that turned out to be very good. They've worked with a young setter. They have a very good right side. But DeBerg brings a legitimate 5 points per set. She's the only player transferring that brings those kinds of points. And if you can add 5 points to your production, you're in the hunt right away. And they can count on DeBerg, who will play her 5th year for LSU indoor, and then go for the sand team in the spring. But I think DeBerg not only gives maturity, leadership, and point scoring to an LSU team that was going to make a run at this anyway. The word out of Baton Rouge is that they have been all summer working hard. Everybody's contributed to the workouts. Everybody's stayed in touch. So I think LSU is on the rise, and I think you need to keep an eye on them.
Let's go from down south to up in the Northeast, where the little kids are about to suit up and play in Williamsport. We're going to stay in Pennsylvania, and so is Serena Gray, right? She's going from Happy Valley to the Steel City, as this is not something we see often, right? A transfer that stays inside a rivalry and makes Pittsburgh as dangerous as any team in the nation, right?
Well, if you live in Pennsylvania, you're excited because now there are 2 teams that can go to the Final Four. Both teams have improved themselves. Pittsburgh lost one player that scored some points, but they add Gray, which really helps to their defense. I'm sure he can find point scoring there to help them. But I think Pitt's a legitimate top 10 team, right with Penn State. And I think it's interesting what the transfers do for both of those teams.
I mean, you've got Lund, you've got Endy, you've got Gray now. Serena Gray never quite played up to that potential, that top 10 recruit moniker that was attached to her name. She had a lot of, what do you want to say, horses in the stable, right, for the setters to kind of deal with in the last few seasons. There's been some off the field stuff. There's been some on the court stuff. So I'm curious to see if she can right the ship at Pitt. We will talk about those flurry of Penn State transfers in a minute. But first, and I think, this one may be the most important transfer here, as a national champion, All-American, leaves Lexington to go down south to Waco. Baylor needed someone that could be reliable, right, on a point-to-point basis to help out Yassiana Presley. Do you think Avery Skinner is that person?
Well, I think Avery Skinner will get them 3 points per set without a doubt, and she's proved that she can do that. But they have a problem. They have 3 people on the left side right now, and they've got to decide where they're going to play Presley, where they're going to play Skinner. Skinner, I think, has proved to be best on the left. So does that mean that they move Presley to the right? It's kind of a stumbling block for Baylor right now. We can't wait to see them play their first matches to see how the coaches deal with this.
There are a couple coaches that I know you and I are excited to see what they do. I think Dave Shondell has a lot of puzzle making to deal with Ryan McGuire. Those two teams played against each other in the regional semifinals in 2019. He's got his work cut out for him, as does Russ Rose. I mean, it's a good thing to have too many All-Americans on a roster. You are adding Adana Rollins to this team. She comes over from Minnesota, where she was already a proven star. She was, backing up Samity, the Robin to her Batman. I think now Adana Rollins can be the Superman on this team. I don't know what you think about that. Who would you consider the top player right now on Penn State?
Well, I don't know about the top player, but I think the left side is a competitive situation. I don't think Rollins is necessarily a lock. They have a 6'2" transfer, I believe, from Maryland also coming in there. And they have Katie Clark, a middle who can play right, coming in from TCU. That hits very well off of 1 foot. And I think she is underperformed the last 2 or 3 years. I really liked her as a junior player. So I think Penn State has a lot of talent, going to compete for a lot of positions. It will be interesting to see how this turns out at Penn State.
Well, let's go ahead and turn the graphic and look at our number 6 transfer, and that is Erica Pritchard, another player who is an all Big Ten outside, staying in conference. Russ Rose using that portal. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't seen many players pass as well as Adana Rollins, and I haven't seen many players with as meaty of a ball as Erica Pritchard. She adds an A serve as well. I mean, Annie Kate Fitzpatrick is really good on the left side. Johnny Parker on the right side. I have no idea what Russ Rose is going to do. Fans, what do you guys think Russ Rose is going to do? Do you think maybe he employs some sort of, day off system for some of his veterans? Maybe you get a Friday off and you play a Saturday. I know some coaches have kind of teased that now that they've gone back to that grueling Big Ten schedule of flying to Wisconsin on Friday, getting on a flight at midnight, flying to Minnesota on Friday night. It's interesting, but Erica Pritchard, she's got to find a way to play, because she is not going to transfer to Happy Valley to not play, right? She's going to be that competitive athlete that we've seen year after year out in Maryland.
And you can say the same about Rollins. She's not transferring from Minnesota, a potential Final Four team, to sit on the bench. So yeah, it's going to be wild in that whole situation up there.
Yep. Let's add one more, right? With Katie Clark, 6, 5, 6, and 7, all headed to Happy Valley. Yeah. Clark is someone that is a little bit more of an unknown. I will be honest, I don't watch a ton of Big 12 volleyball. It's just not necessarily the content that I have, tuned into in the last few years. And now with the announcement that the Big 12 is, maybe moving away from having Oklahoma and Texas, they're going to the SEC. I think it's a good decision for Clark. She's going to the middle. She's probably going to have a spot. That's less of a conversation to replace Gray. And Mick, this Penn State team, I don't know what coaches were necessarily thinking when they didn't put him in the top 10, because on paper, I'm not sure there's anyone that can compete in terms of the skyscrapers that are in Rec Hall.
Well, chemistry has a whole lot to do with a lot of things, and a lot of people are moving around to try to improve chemistry, to find a place that will work for them. Coaches trying to find the right combinations, and when you don't have a lot of time to practice, the only other thing you can do is change players, I think. So everybody's had a summer now to deal with this. So I hope everybody's focused when they come in this fall, because there are a lot of new faces and a lot of new positions to be evaluated. And, Penn State is going to compete. So I think maybe it would be worth the price of a ticket to go to their practice.
That's true. If they let you in, and, I think there's a little bit less pressure. Caitlin Horde is one of the smoothest swinging middles in the entire nation. She makes every swing look effortless. She can do it 30 times, as we've seen her pick up 20 kills in 30 swings. Allie Holland stepped up in that middle position last year when Gray was missing matches. So that's another thing where I'm not sure if the level of pressure for Katie Clark will be up there like it will be for Rollins and Pritchard to be as good as they need to be in every practice. But enough of the East Coast bias, Mick. Let's focus on the West Coast here. 8, 9, and 10. We're talking West Coast volleyball. Let's start with 8 and Mia Tuaniga from Long Beach to USC. USC they've needed someone. The Trojans have been lacking that setter position here in the last few seasons. I think Tuaniga is the person that will bring them across, and we'll see that Trojan red and black back in the tournament this season.
Well, they're going to have some competition though for that position. Their starting setter is back, and they've got a lot of talent on that team, and they've been going through a series of coaches and upheaval there. Brad Keller, I think, is really working hard to get that straightened out this fall. Let's see how they come out of the blocks, and let's see if they play a 6-2 or they go with a 5-1.
My gut says that we see Tuaniga, and we see Tuaniga setting to Shannon Scully, who is a massive outside hitter that adds instant offense. She moves over not too far of a drive, right, from Malibu over to LA, Pepperdine to USC. It'll be a battle, right, at the outside position. This is not going to be an easy add for Scully to just automatically jump into the lineup. But at the end of the day, when you're named all WCC, when you make a move like this, you have to assume that things may not have been promised, but you think Scully's going to get some playing time, right?
Well, I think she probably will get some playing time. Botkin's definite lock there on the one left side position, but Kaylin O's is really, really good. And if you haven't seen Kaylin much, she's a 6'2", 6'3" outside out of Arizona that for some reason just hasn't come into her own yet. But when I watched her, I thought she was going to be one of the best players in the country, a definite All-American. And he's got now 3 bodies in that position. Plus, he's also big on the right side. So I think SC could surprise. I didn't say much about them in the poll being the 26th team, but I do think that they will move up the poll pretty fast just because of their talent.
And then we rounded out with another setter in Steph Jankowicz. Jankowicz was an all-conference grab, MVC setter of the year for Illinois State, and she will be looking to gain some chemistry with Danny Drews in Utah. With Utah losing their setter, now they feel like, I think they're a little bit more comfortable with the position that they're in. What do you think about Jankowicz out in Utah?
Well, I think she better be good because Utah needs this position filled. With their setter going to Texas, they have a new setter coming in. Drews is the main scorer for Utah at this point. Maddie Robinson's a new player coming on. I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to see her this summer, and she can score the ball, but she's unproven yet in the collegiate level with that. And so Jankowicz has to be good right away with Drews to keep Utah in the hunt in that top 25 poll.
Okay, so now we've got our 10 most notable transfers. But who did we miss? Who do you guys think is a bigger name that was in the transfer portal that made a move? Was it Paige Hammonds maybe? Was it someone else that we mentioned in the earlier segment? BYU also getting a libero and Gretchen Reinert. A lot of big names made the move. Nia Robinson went from Northwestern to UNC. A couple other names have been on the move. So I want to know from you, the diehard volleyball fans, who else we should have mentioned in this segment. But Mick, at the end of the day, we only have so much time to talk about so much. So I'm happy that we can kind of break through and break down our top 25 teams here in the AVCA preseason poll. The weekend is near. August 27th, NCAA volleyball is back. We are excited for 10 a.m. Eastern time matches, 7 a.m. Western time matches. It's all going to be kickstarted. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention in terms of some of these big names that have been on the move before we have one more episode that previews the season next week?
Well, I have two observations. One, Texas State got into the tournament last spring. They beat Baylor. They beat a bunch of teams before the tournament started. They proved themselves. They went into the tournament, got matched up against Utah Valley, won that match, went to the second round, got Nebraska at Nebraska. Didn't turn out so well, but they played very, very tough. They have everybody back, and they've added a Maryland transfer, a right side who will probably want to hit left side for them, which gives them points. That's one thing. Missouri is the other big question mark. I see they got a lot of votes. They lost 6 players, I think, transfers. They brought in 3 or 4 transfers. They're the most unknown team I've seen out there, or haven't seen out there, and would like to see. I'd like to know what Missouri is doing, because it sounds intriguing what they might come up with.
There you go. So we'll have a little bit more time next week to break things down, including maybe take a trip around, the arenas and talk to some of these seniors that are coming back. We've got some irons in the fire. Jada Gardner is the name that you mentioned with Texas State, so it's interesting to keep an eye on her. We've already teased that Texas State has a couple fun pre-conference tournaments, so I think that's where a lot of the frauds become legitimate, and a lot of those teams that we may be worried about in the top 20 fall on out. So stay tuned with us for next week's episode. Make sure to subscribe over on YouTube, share it with us. Tell us one friend, right? Comment who's one friend on Twitter that you want to get more into college volleyball, and we're going to try to do a great job of wrangling them all up and continuing to bring you A+ volleyball content as the season is so close. We officially have some numbers next to teams' names. Not that it means anything. It just gives us a little bit more stuff to talk about. Thank you so much for listening and watching. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gillman, and this was episode 2 of 6 Rotations.